Welcome back to Money Conversation with Everyday People. I'm your host, Rika, and today we're embarking on a deeply important journey within our podcast, Breaking Free, Rebuilding Financial Independence. In this episode, we explore the crucial topic of financial inclusion through the powerful lens of individuals who have navigated some of life's most challenging transitions, living relationships where financial control, abuse, or extreme dependence strips away their autonomy. This is a sensitive topic, and our goal is to create a safe space for understanding, empathy, and empowerment. If anything we discuss resonate deeply with you and you need support, please know that you're not alone and resources are available. We'll be sharing where you can find help in our show notes. Today, I'm honored to have Kim with us, a survivor, breakup, and divorce coach, and someone who has spent over 20 years working in financial services and risk. Through both her professional experience and personal journey, Kim offers a unique perspective on the subtle dynamics of financial abuse and how it hides in plain sight. Kim, thank you for your immense courage in joining us. To start, perhaps you could help us understand what financial abuse or heavy dependence looked like in your experience or in the lives of those you've helped.
Yes, thank you for having me. So, financial abuse can range quite different in different circumstances. So, on one hand, it can be restricting access to bank accounts, for example, playing the role of I'll look after the money and giving an allowance, but not actually giving that person access to their own funds. So the one person's heavily reliant on the other person for any access to money. Other scenarios can be things like secret debt. So one person can either rack up debt in the other person's name without them knowing, so using their identity, and it usually can be loved ones, and that's why they don't see it. Or it can be they've racked up debt, got themselves into a situation, and then they weaponize the love. So they say, if you love me, you'll help me get out of this. If you love me, you'll help me bail out. So then that person either uses their savings or takes out financial products to help them get out of the debt. So they tend to be the most common scenarios.
Mm. And just beyond the financial aspect, what was the broader impact of this kind of control, perhaps on your life, if you're willing to share, or on
Mm-hmm.
someone's life beyond their bank accounts? And what is the emotional toll or the long-term ripple effects that you've kind of seen?
Yeah, so I'd say for me personally, especially someone that worked in financial services, I worked in risk. I did I do a lot of work with companies on fraud, and I was in the industry. I started in credit, so I know the system. So for me, there was a huge element of shame, um, and why didn't I see it coming? A lot of self-blame. Why did I not notice it? How could I have not known that my husband was taking out debt? How did I not see this happening? I would say with a lot of my clients, shame is quite a big one, especially for women. I think there's a stereotype in society that women you know, aren't necessarily the main wage earners. They don't necessarily look after the money. It's a male role. But I have a lot of clients that are professionals that are raising children. Some of them are building their own businesses, but have all been, I don't like to say the word victim. I always call them survivors, but they've all experienced this and not seen it coming. So I would say shame is a big one. I think self-trust, it really impacts your ability to self-trust. So a lot of doubt comes in. So even after the fact and trying to rebuild, you second guess yourself, you question yourself because you beat yourself up about the fact that you didn't see it coming the first time. So how can you trust yourself? So making decisions tends to be hard. And then I think there's an element of you feel like you failed, either, especially if usually this causes the breakdown of a relationship, especially those as well that are parents. So, you failed your children, you failed as a wife, or a husband. So yeah, I think, it goes far beyond the aspect of money. It really does start to take a toll on your self-identity and your self-worth. And I work with a lot of clients, a lot of the work that I do with clients is all about rebuilding that. And it's not just about rebuilding their financial independence, it's about rebuilding their self-identity and their self-worth.
Yeah, thanks for sharing a bit about just your personal story there. And I guess why do you think it's so incredibly hard, for those, maybe you can also kind of share yours as well, for those experiencing it or those that have experienced it, and for outsiders to really and truly recognize, even talk about this form of control?
Yeah, I think there's a few aspects to it. I think money in general still tends to be a taboo subject. I think there's still an element of shame around talking about money. So the silence keeps people trapped. People don't want to speak up about it, especially money in relationships, even with friends and family, people don't want to talk about their marital status with money. And I also think, when people think about abuse, particularly domestic abuse, financial abuse is no bruises. So it's not like you can see people, even, your loved ones, it's not like you can see somebody has physically been injured for you to say, oh, are you okay?
Yeah.
Is there anything I can do to help? It's all done behind closed doors. So there's still an element of silence and secrecy around it.
Mm. And yeah, it's, I mean, like you kind of mentioned, right, when it comes to really helping people to, from what you do as a divorce coach and all that, and I mean, when it gets to that point of the divorce, and really taking the step to leave or even just to assert financial independence while still, perhaps before it gets to that divorce aspects, whilst in a relationship, must be an incredibly difficult and brave decisions, right? And I'm often wondering what marks this turning point for someone, and what finally makes them say, okay, enough is enough, or I just need to find my own way. Because I mean, it can be incredibly difficult, right? Because it's also like all the psychological trauma that kind of goes
Yeah.
to it, and really moving away from that and really like, okay, perhaps like enough is enough, and I need to move forward. I need to find my own way.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't happen overnight. It's tiny realizations that stack up where you start to notice patterns,
Mm,
particularly lies. You start to get familiar with the lies, and then you start to realize that these actually don't feel right. A lot, I know from my experience, it was kind of a gut instinct that I feel like I'm surviving, I'm not living. It's the constant turmoil of, is this going to happen again? Do I believe him? And my clients say the same thing. And I think a big element as well is that with people that have children. So I myself, I've got twin boys. A lot of my clients have kids. I think kids is a big element to it. At what point can we break the pattern? And kids are the ones that actually do give a lot of survivors the strength to do this, because you find it in you. I think it's that maternal instinct kicks in and you find it in you to break the pattern. And then once you've made that decision and you've woken up and realized, yeah, this isn't right, this is just, I'm stuck in a cycle,
mm,
then you kick into survival mode, and then it's right, how do I get out? So it's very, very gradual. It doesn't happen overnight, because I think the key thing to remember here in these situations is you're dealing with people that you love,
yeah.
and you're dealing with, and it doesn't just happen, in marital, it can be parent child as well. So it's very, very different to be in, like a scam, or you've been a victim or a survivor of a fraud scam, which has been a stranger, which is the same feeling. You still feel the shame, still, but it's harder to recognize because you're in love with the person that's doing this to you.
Yeah, wow. It's really, because what, like you said, when it comes to the scams as well, so not necessarily like, okay, in a husband wife relationship, and also like kids and parent relationship, but also like scams where it's like the
Hmm.
online scam, like when
Yeah.
prey on on vulnerable people that are just looking for love and all these
Yeah.
other aspects. And I say, okay, send me this because I'm this, I'm that. And then gradually you start to send the money, but then obviously you get sucked in because the emotional aspect is in already. So it's really difficult to kind of bringing the logical aspects of it in as well, like, okay, why am I really sending this money? So it's really most people will be like, okay, why are you doing this? Not really understanding, like, look, we have both the emotional and the logical aspect, and when it comes to love, it's more of very emotional in this sense. I mean, so when considering that move towards independence, right? What were some of the like the biggest fears or perceived obstacles you or others have faced, perhaps both practical but also emotional wise?
I think the biggest fear is around, especially those. I mean, I had the privilege of understanding the industry, understanding the products. So for me, the financial, I was aware, I had the knowledge. So for me, that aspect wasn't as scary because I knew what I needed to do, I knew what was out there. But there are people out there that don't understand what's out there. So it's very scary to think, right, okay, so I'm going to make this decision. How am I going to do this on my own? I don't know how to open a bank account. I don't know how to budget. I've got kids to support. So there's that aspect in terms of the financial stability side of it. And then there's the fear that comes with the shame. You know, it's the fear of, well, what's everybody going to think? What's everybody going to say? People are going to be saying to me exactly what I'm saying to myself. Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you see this coming? Why would you be that stupid to give that money away or do it? So there's two aspects to it. There's the practical side of it in terms of the financial stability, and then there's the emotional side of it, and all linking back to the self-worth and the shame and how people can beat themselves up about it, in terms of what's everyone else now going to say? Because now the secret, to move on, you have to make that decision, and all of this starts to come out in the open, and that becomes quite difficult, especially if you don't have a support system.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you touched upon the very important aspects of the practical aspect, right? When it comes to the financial literacy, because
Hmm.
we're both from finance, and it's really when you look at financial literacy globally, it's really diabolical, right? They really, really low. Excuse me, saying diabolical made me choked. Um, so see, like the data is there, right? When it comes to even like looking at men and women, the the differences in financial literacy, and when I often see that people are not willing to actually say they are not financially literate because they always think of it as a shame. So it goes back to that emotional part of it as well. Like, okay, I feel ashamed because I feel like I don't have the financial literacy. But I think it's really important, like when it comes to no matter where we are in our life stages, we need to really educate ourselves, like the financial literacy aspect, because that ultimately helps us, number one, reduce debt, number two, build our pension, number three, build wealth again, build wealth, and that moves towards the independency aspect of it, being financially independent, so that when at any point in time, like in an abusive relationship or even abusive work as well, we
Hmm.
have this independency in the sense that we have our money somewhere because we understand a bit on how to, like you said, like budgets and also kind of like start to save and whatnot. But moving nicely into having this journey to financial autonomy, so looking at the practical side, but also I think it also affect the emotional side, like you mentioned, because not having that knowledge goes into the shame aspect of it.
Hmm.
And once that courageous decision is made, where does someone uh, can even begin, right? For someone starting with potentially no savings at all, no credit, or even no safe place to go to. So, what would be the absolute first steps that are crucial to securing immediate safety and financial needs?
So, there is that saying around knowledge is power. And I think that is the first step. There's so many free resources now on the internet. There are support groups like Citizens Advice, there's legal aid, there's Money Helper, that's an free online resource. There's websites like moneysupermarket.com. All of these resources have vast amounts of information on there for you to use, which is free. So reading, absorbing all the information, and then practical steps. The key one for me definitely is to get a copy of your credit report, because you don't, especially where if you've been in a situation where you're jointly linked with somebody, to get that copy. And if there's anything on there that you don't agree with or doesn't look right, then you can speak to the credit reference agencies and make a notice of correction. Speak to your bank, explain the situation, get all your bank statements. I think it's a case of, first step is the knowledge. So learning the things that you don't know, but then also the knowledge about your current situation. So that's bank statements, that's your credit report. Then it's reaching out to the potential people or organisations that can help. So your own bank, credit reference agencies, citizens advice, legal aid, coaches, therapists, if you've got, for the support. So there's a lot of services out there, but I would always start with building up your knowledge of what you think you don't know, and build up the documents to help you form a picture of what your current situation is, and then you go from there.
And I really like the one that you mentioned when it comes to the credit, to really kind of get to understand what your credit is like, your credit score. 'Cause lots of people don't even look into that, right? And there are quite a number of credit agencies that one can use. So depending on which country the listeners are in as well. So we're going to provide some resources as well at the end of it, to kind of really help you to see where you can look at your credit. And because they always flag it as well. If there is any changes, you get a
Yeah.
notification via your email that's okay, maybe you've gone up or you've gone down, or does this make sense? So you're actually kind of on top of your credit profile, which is super, super important. And like you said, there are lots of resources out there as well for people to kind of start getting that knowledge. So let's now talk about building that foundational financial knowledge, right? When financial independence has been limited or actually controlled, learning about money might have been discouraged or even impossible, right? Okay, because when you look at it, I mean, we both come from the finance industry, like I mentioned, but there's always this cultural context that comes into place, right? I
Mm-hmm.
remember when I first started working in investment banking back then, and to me, it was just like, oh my God, it's only men that I'm seeing here. And growing up back in my home country in Nigeria, and my culture, women control the money, basically. So there's also this cultural context, right? Perhaps some cultures also kind of discourage the learning about financial knowledge, or even makes it impossible. So what, like for people that don't have this background, right, or don't have these cultural nuances when it comes to financial knowledge, what are some of the very first financial concepts someone needs to grab, or practical resources that they can turn to really understand the basic money management, budgeting, or credit basics?
Yeah, so I'd go back to the resources as well. There's a lot out there. So starting to understand what products are out there and what products suit your needs.
Mm-hmm.
And then looking into the criteria of how you able to get those products. There's bank accounts now. I think that it's changed for a lot of my clients in terms of, people that were married for 20, 15, 20 years ago. Opening a bank account's massively changed now. So I would look at the options. Price comparison sites are a big thing. In the UK, they're really helpful because they're non-biased, and they list all the products on the market, and then you can have a look at what suits your needs. There's even products out there, if you don't have a credit history, there's things that can help you to start there. But I would always be, look at your current situation and watch your needs, and make yourself aware of what those products are. I think touching on that as well in terms of products, I think, the financial, even before you get into a relationship, I think your financial knowledge, when you're looking to financially link yourself with somebody. So let's get a joint account, let's buy a house together. And I'm not trying to scare people off from doing that, but ask yourself, do you actually understand what that means?
Yes.
Like, do you understand what it means to financially link with someone? And do you understand, if things don't go to plan, do
Mm,
you understand how you financially separate? Because I certainly didn't know how to financially separate. I thought once you got divorced, that was it. And in the UK, that's not the case. And a lot of my clients see that as well. And then I would say as well, if you are going to go down that route of financially linking, have a look at the products and, for example, consent. Is it joint consent or is it just one signature? And just always have it be just always have that second question in your head. And I would say the other thing is to have your own emergency fund, regardless of if you're in a relationship or not. And that touches on what you mentioned about work as well. Sometimes it's not just the feeling of trapped doesn't always in a relationship, it's also can be in a workplace as well. But why do people stay stuck in a job that they don't particularly want to be in? Because they don't have an emergency fund to tide them over for a few months while they can find the job that they actually want to do. So I would say having that emergency fund is really quite key. And it doesn't have to be massive where I know there's a lot of people, everybody's in a different situation when it comes to what they can afford to save. But, there's a lot of tools now, even on banking apps, where if you set it up, you can create saving pots just from rounding up on things that you've spent. So if you spend, $9.99, it'll put the penny into a saving pot, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but it starts to build up, and that can be quite a useful tool as well. But I would say your own fund for emergencies is one of the key steps to independence, regardless of whether you're in a relationship or not.
yeah. And I really like touching on when you talk about before you get into marriage. So I coach a lot of couples. So in as much as I'm a financial advisor and wealth manager,
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of financial coaching as well. So couples that are looking to get into marriages and really talking about the finances, because sometimes it's a difficult topic, right? To
Yeah.
kind of talk about just before getting into it. And really when it comes to, again, the separation, yes, in as much as you would like to build a family portfolio together, what I always say is always have your own separate investing. Saving and investing, very, very important after building your emergency fund, like you kind of mentioned. And also when it comes to emergency fund, everyone is different, right? It's really looking at how you can keep up with that, because at the end of the day, emergency fund in case of emergency and contingency. So not dipping in and out of that
Mm-hmm.
fund, ensuring that, okay, perhaps not knowing what might happen in the future. Is it going to be maybe having to leave abusive work, having to leave an emergency, sorry, having to leave a marriage, or what, even if it's like insurance or accidents or whatever it is, right? Really, really important, because this gives you the peace of mind, and always having that mindset of not just only saving, but also investing to build wealth and to build assets, right? Irrespective of whether you come together or not. And I like the one that you also mentioned about whose signature is on it, basically. Because I do have some clients as well that's divorced. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't really know about the finances. I just left it to my partner to take care of it, and now I'm having to start from ground zero. So really, really important when it comes to signatory, the access to it, and also just being involved in the financial aspect of the family as a couple, if that is it in that sense. And so just taking looking at those immediate vulnerable phases, right? I mean, you've mentioned some support systems and resources. Are there specific ones that have actually guided you, basically, and maybe just to, if you've used any, right? Because obviously you worked in the credits and you're in finance industry. Did you have to use any of those, like immediate vulnerable phases, the support system? maybe perhaps legal aid, social services, and also like non-profits, or have you kind of helped those that might have needed this, and how did they work out for them?
Yeah, so I think for me, because I knew the industry, I knew where to go. So for me, my first point of call was my credit file, like what was on it. Um, Speaking to the credit reference agencies, so in the UK, that's Experian and Equifax, to make notices of correction. Um, Legal advice is, I was fortunate enough to have a really good lawyer to advise me all the way, as well as like a financial advisor. For those that don't have that, there's legal aid, citizens advice can help. Even there's credit unions as well, which not many people know about. They're a good support as well. I would say as well the bank. So, speaking to the bank and explaining the situation, they are really helpful. And going through your statements and going through what joint assets you do have, and sitting down and seeing what needs to be untangled. But I would say for me personally, the biggest support I had was legal, because they helped me, because when you're going through it as well, you're not in the right frame of mind to think clearly. So they helped me do a step-by-step plan, really, in terms of, okay, what's your current situation? So it was all the documents that I needed to get together. Where do I want to get to, and how do I get there? And yeah, like I said, if people don't have the resources or access to a lawyer, there's legal aid out there, and citizens advice is really good. I refer a lot of my clients to citizens advice. And yes, there's the resources that I've mentioned in terms of, when you start to look at new products and things, or even just education stuff, the price comparison sites are really useful. I mentioned them because I worked for Money Supermarket, so at that point I knew all the what was coming in and out of the market. So I'm aware that I was privileged in that sense. But I do recommend, any of the price comparison sites or any educational pieces to my clients, and then looking at building up. You've mentioned investment, and that's your field. Having access, particularly for women, like you've mentioned, to even understand what investment is. And I think people get quite scared of investments. I know that was one area for me that was relatively new. It wasn't my background. So you hear all the jargon, it's something that, oh, that's not for me. Or I think people think you need a lot of money before you can start to invest. So I would say it's reaching out to key people that have the specialist knowledge in the areas that you need support on, and that for me would be legal and financial, which there are supports, and we can put the links in the show notes as well.
Super. So now let's talk about securing income and building a future, right? So I think a critical step really to last independence is often securing a stable income. So if perhaps they don't have it, and so what are some of the strategies you've kind of seen work for people gaining employment, developing new skills, or even considering starting a small business, especially if they hadn't worked in a while. So for those that perhaps they couldn't work because of this financial hold on them in the household, whether be with a partner or parents or whatever it is.
Yeah, so yeah, a bit of a mixed bag. So there's some clients who were the main wage earners. So for them, it was kind of getting them back to having a disposable income that could support the lifestyle that they had, and also how do they pay off the debts that they either had to take out to pay off debts for their partners, or debts that they didn't know were in their name. So that comes back to the budgeting and spending that I mentioned earlier. And then there's some clients that haven't worked before, so that a lot of them will go out to train, and there are government funded training courses. There's a lot of training out there and courses. Some of my clients have gone in to do teaching assistants, or looking at but keeping any sort of training that's out there that sets them on a path where they know there's an end goal. And then I've got quite a few that have saw it as an opportunity to set up their own business, whether that's in coaching. I know there's a lot of coaches like me where they've experienced this and they want to give back and help people that have gone through it. So there's a lot of people that go down the coaching route. I've got a client that's done psychology and wanted to go down that. So it's all about retraining, looking into, again, it's about the knowledge. So look out there in your community with the government funding. There are funding to help with the training. And then there's part-time work as well. Some of my clients do a bit of a mix, so that like part-time jobs while they're training. And then some do a complete, say, I want to start from scratch, and do a complete turnaround and say, right, I'm gonna look at a career change as well. So a little bit of a mix. And I think, especially when I speak to my clients, that's all. And sometimes it can be scary, but I try and reframe it with them that actually this is the opportunity now where you can take back your power and you can design a life that how you want it, not because you should have it that way or because you need to support somebody else or whatever reason. It's what would you like to do, and you kind of build it from there. And it is scary, but there is a lot of support and resources out there for people.
Yeah, I love the fact that you said that you went into coaching just to help as well. So it's really
Mm-hmm.
impacting others and imparting that knowledge as well from what you've gone through, but also bringing back your own finance background and especially being in credit, but also with one of your clients that is also gone into psychology to really kind of help. So all these lived experiences, it kind of helps the next person, right, to say, okay, help them within that process. Because it just took me back again to my own personal story. So it's not really financial abuse, but it was more like a financial advisor was like he wasn't going to give me a mortgage because of my gender and my race, right? And this is someone that has worked in the finance industry for a long time. And I was just thinking, okay, if it was someone else, they would have just taken that and say, right, perhaps I don't have the power to change whatever it is, but being able to have that power, which you're giving to other women, I had the power to kind of say, okay, I'll take my money from this bank and put it in another bank that would then give me my mortgage, because at the end of the day, it's all part of financial independence. And abuse can come in any form of shape. It's a huge one, like what we're discussing now, but looking back at this, it's kind of an abuse, right? Because it was
Yeah.
like, okay, because of my gender and my race, sorry, I can't give you a mortgage, which is really impacting, right, my future wealth building process. And I like the part that you said it's really like on their own terms as well, like gradually on their own terms. And this is what I also kind of relate to when it comes to saying, look, when you build wealth, right, it's really on your own terms, right? So the wealth building is not only for the wealthy, like you mentioned. People might think, oh my God, investing, I don't want to deal with it. But once the education comes in, and also the fact that it's actually on your own terms that you're doing that, then there's more power to it, there's more accountability, and then there's more independency that kind of goes into it. So, I mean, you worked in credit, right? And because for many survivors, right, credit is either non-existent
Mm-hmm.
or severely damaged by the abuser. So I know you kind of touched upon this earlier, but I would love for you to kind of also kind of give the practical steps that someone can begin to take to really rebuild their credit and really establish their independent financial identity.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, it's taking a look at your credit file so that once you know your score as well, whether you've got a low score or you've never taken credit out before, it's having a look at what that looks like. And if you've had someone take credit out in your name, has that damaged it? You can get that fixed. I think also some people don't realize that credit doesn't just come in the form of credit cards. If you take a mobile phone out, for example, on a contract, that can be on your credit file. Some energy providers do it as well. So there's ways of building up credit just with your everyday bills. So, if you have the option to pay monthly, maybe start to do that so that you start to build up and you can show that you're credit worthy. I would say, take out, and again, it's not financial advice, not promoting to get yourself into debt or anything like that, but take out, a credit card that is for people that have no credit. There are credit cards out there, but be very mindful of the fact that it's high interest. But you could use that to, pay for your shopping and then you pay that off. So the more that you show that you're able to spend the credit, use the credit, but pay it off in full so that you don't get yourself into debt, it slowly builds up. And you can do it small, it could be a small amount. It doesn't have to be hundreds and hundreds. I think it's just making sure that you understand the terms and conditions of that credit. Is that, are you able to afford it, etc. But slowly doing it that way. But yeah, I think for me, the whole credit piece, I think that comes into the industry as well. Changes in the industry. I've spoken about this a few times in terms of, it'd be great to start seeing products that actually serve survivors so that they can get the support to restart, and they're not, because whilst I mentioned there are products out there for people with no credit, the interest rates on that are very high. So there is a high risk there that people that are vulnerable and are surviving could get themselves into more debt because it's such a high interest. So it'd be great to see products out there. And even, we mentioned earlier about, I've done credit before, so I used to do underwriting. I think at the minute the way people are assessed on their credit worthy is quite, it's an old method, it's an old system dealing with data that's historic. I think there's a move in the industry, particularly where if we can start to look at real-time data, and that data is based up on, the current, what your financial and what your credit worthiness looks like currently using real-time data from all sorts of different sources. I think that would be a good change in terms of, financial inclusion all around. I think the way things are assessed at the minute is it only serves one part of society. It doesn't serve all parts of society. And then again, I'd speak to the bank, and not just, if you're not finding the help or support from your current bank, have a look at other banks that can provide that support.
And you can kind of check that on Money Supermarkets, right?
Yeah, Money Supermarket or any of the other price comparison sites. And I think the Money Saving Expert, that newsletter's really great. Money Helper, all of these are really great. And I think, the more there's quite a lot now around financial education. I think the more there's a lot of free events. I work with a team as part of Engage, where we do financial education on different topics, whether that's financial crime, whether that's payments, whether that's opening bank accounts. And there's a lot out there that are trying to reach this. I think also, it comes back, if I could change one thing, it'd be the education system, because if we could have that in school, so that when people come out of school, they understand the financials, because a lot of people are in, they get themselves into a situation where they don't understand, because you're not taught it in school. You come out and, you don't understand what the products are or what they mean. So yeah, I would say there's a lot of resources out there. I think it's gathering the knowledge again and understanding what you need and making sure that the products are right for you. And that's why I strongly say with the products that are out there at the minute, it's quite limited for people that don't have, and you kind of get penalised because of the interest rates. I think that's where there's a lot to be done around the financial inclusion piece.
Because I mean, you gave a very good insights to that regarding the product. So for those that are listening, if you have amazing ways to kind of work on Kim's idea, you never know. You never know. And I guess it's. I mean, we've kind of said all this, like financial education, the basic financial services like banking, affordable credit, tailored financial education for individuals in this situation. I mean, what specific barriers do this inclusion what specific barriers do this inclusion do these people often face when it comes to all these aspects that we've kind of mentioned?
I think educate. I mean, I know we've mentioned it, but education, I think, is the biggest. It's the biggest
Exactly.
barrier.
Mm,
Yeah. You know, I think if we can educate kids in school,
mm,
it will massively reduce. It will reduce this. When you know, I know that we're privileged because we've worked in the industry, but I didn't walk into the industry knowing about all the products. I learned it on the job. But everybody should have that access to it. You know, kids should understand the difference between a credit card and a debit card. They should understand, you know, savings, investment. They should understand what a mortgage is, an overdraft. They should understand, you know, what credit actually is. That it's not just infinite money, and
yeah.
you can just spend it. I think also, you know, when we look at the financial help, I think, you know, frontline training would be great, particularly in banks, so that they can help spot these signs. You know, we mentioned earlier that this type of abuse, you don't see bruises on people. So it would be great if, you know, I know with my story, I'd seen stuff coming out of the joint account that I didn't recognise, so I immediately phoned the bank, and it was, you know, something's happened. I think someone's took my details. Obviously, realising later that it was my husband, but I think if you can have people on the front line that understands if somebody's questioning a transaction on a joint account, don't just dismiss it and be, oh, well, it's a joint account, so it's joint consent.
Yeah.
Because even direct debits that are set up, it's not only one person needs to set that up. So I think the protocols around consent on joint, whether that's joint savings, joint accounts, joint loans, I think that needs to be key. That there should be joint signatory, and the direct debit piece. I think is another one. I think even education around, you know, your legal rights and your financial rights, particularly when you're getting into relationships, and you know, it doesn't even have to be married. Even if you're just moving in with somebody, I think the whole education piece around that
Mm,
is key.
mm,
And you know, again, that should come from schools, but also, you know, it's probably the industry responsibility as well to, if you're going to sign up for a joint account,
mm,
making sure that the people that are signing up for that understand what they're signing for. And I know that there's terms and conditions, but again, I think those terms and conditions do not suit the majority of society, because not a lot of people have
mm,
the bandwidth to read all that. They're just, you know, and especially when you're excited as well and you're in love and you want to. So yeah, I think there's still barriers there,
mm-hmm,
which I think personally could be quick fixes. You know, the consent protocols are pretty quick.
mm,
The training for staff to understand the flags. Um, and I guess, you know, if you take away from the financial side, I think, you know, the reason why I'm doing this podcast, and I know that you share your story, is the more people talk about it, the more people will open up and ask for help, because they won't feel like they're on their own, and they won't feel like they're stupid, and they won't feel like, oh, how could I'm not going to tell anybody because I'm, you know, the shame comes with it.
mm-hmm,
I think the more people that share, the more forums there are where people can share their experiences, and stories, the less isolated people feel.
mm,
Um, and I would say as well that, you know, back on the point of training, and even for friends and family, I guess it's, you know, really being mindful of creating a safe space for people to have those conversations and not feel like they're being judged.
exactly.
Um, I think they're key points.
Mm. Yeah, that's really important. I'm going to touch upon that, but before then, because you made a very key key inputs, like okay, when it comes to the formal aspects of education, like with the kids, or I think for the older ones as well, we need to meet them at their workplaces because
Mm-hmm.
I I presented at Money 2020 recently, talking about the AI and financial planning on how we really help with this. And the data that I gave, basically, when it comes to population of EU, so it's an aging population,
Hmm.
78% of EU, so this is excluding UK, 78% is 18 years and above, right? So
Yeah,
the youth is such a tiny proportion. So we need to look at both the youth, but also meet the adult population at where they
yeah,
are. And it's usually at the workplace. So for example, the banks, right, being able to really help their customers, right, when it comes to this financial literacy, because financial literacy in EU, right? So I need to really look into the UK aspects as well, because I was presenting at Amsterdam. So we're looking at only EU financial literacy. Only 18% of the EU adult population have high financial literacy. So you can just 18, so 1/8. So meaning 82% lack it. So there's a lot that
yeah,
really needs to be done, both like introducing it into schools, but also when it comes to meeting the adults, like this 82%, you need to meet them where they are, right? Because this will ultimately impact the financial independency and also being able to live an abusive relationship. And I really like the one that I kind of mentioned when it comes to like having safe spaces and whatnot. So this is where the role of a community, friends,
hmm,
family, or even informal support group really play an important emotional and practical journey towards financial independence. So how has this really helped you if you did actually use some of these, and how is having your people, right, really vital in this instance?
yeah. I mean, workplace that you've just mentioned is a key one. I know for me, I was fortunate enough to obviously work in the industry, but have a great team, really supportive colleagues. The workplace became my safe space, and not necessarily everybody knew my story, but for me, it was somewhere where I wasn't at home. I could be me and be away from that, and a lot of my clients say that. So I think what you touched on there in terms of the workplace providing the financial literacy, I think, even as part of the well-being, I think if we could train people like managers, HR departments to be able to spot the signs. So I mentioned about the banks being able to spot any
Mhm.
red flags. It'd be great, if we could tap into the workplace and how they can spot it. Because again, this form of abuse isn't it's not physical. It's not like someone's going to walk into work with a black eye. But do you spot any changes in behaviour? I know that you know colleagues of mine were able to spot a change in me, and I'm very thankful for having my workplace as my support system. That became my support system in the end. I think coaches, I had a coach as well, and therapist. They're all great forms as well. And obviously, yeah, friends and family. Sometimes friends and family, ironically, can be the hardest form of people to reach out, because you don't want to you don't really want to open up
Touched.
your secret of your marriage failing, or you don't it takes a while for you to be able to say, my brother for me was a massive resource and support. I know a lot of my clients, they really struggle. There can be cultural reasons as well with marriages, um, so it's not that easy to find that. And one thing that I would say is, if for any of the listeners out there, if you feel that anything's resonated with you, or you feel that actually there's signs there that you've seen in a friend or a family member, it goes back to that, you know, to reach out and offer support, but don't offer judgment. Like, rather than saying, why don't you just leave, or why didn't you leave, just ask, how can I help?
Yeah.
And also, people at various stages of their situations. I've got clients that have made the decision and they're ready to go. I've got clients that are they've made the decision, but they're still getting impacted by it. I've got clients that haven't quite made the decision yet. And I think as a friend or a family member, to support somebody going through this, you need to take it at their pace. Like, it's very easy to sit on the outside and be like, well, you said yesterday that you were going to leave and it's a year later. It's it's very easy for people to say that when they're on the outside and they're not living it. So one thing that I would say is, if you are supporting someone through it, is to not be judgmental and to let them do it at their pace, and just let them know that you're there. No judgment, no rushing, it's their timeline. And same goes for the workplace. You know, if you're supporting a colleague, it's the same thing, because the worst thing is the judgment, because anything that you're going to ask them, you know, even like down to, well, you said you were going to leave, or why didn't you leave? I guarantee you it's not something that they're already beating themselves up about. And if they can have a safe space to open up, then gradually they can start to open up and take those steps to learn, build the knowledge, have a look at the products, reach out to the professional services that are out there.
Yeah. Super. So looking back at your journey, what does financial independence truly mean to you now? And what powerful message of hope and resilience do you want to share with others?
So I'd say for me, and I think I speak on for my clients as well, it gives you freedom and choice and safety, because you've got that stability, and it's really, really powerful in the fact that, you know, you get that sense of control back, you get to reclaim your power. And, you know, like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't have to be necessarily you're in an abusive relationship, or you're in a workplace that you don't want to be in. If you can build that for yourself, you'll never ever feel like you're trapped. There'll always be an option for you to, if you choose to walk away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, it's freedom.
Yeah, definitely. And just to wrap up things, what specific actionable advice would you give to someone who is currently experiencing this? So we haven't really talked upon, so and who has just bravely begun, or who has just bravely begun their financial journey to financial independence.
I would say keep going, stay strong, speak to people, even if it's just one close friend. You're not alone. Speak to them. The more you speak to other people about it, the less alone and less isolated you feel. And I'd just say to take each day. I mean, for me, it was as simple as, right, I'm going to make my bed today. And
Yeah.
if you can make your bed today, and then the next day is, right, I'm going to make a decision on this on my to-do list, or I'm going to open my own bank account. You know, it's very much always take it as baby steps.
Yes.
And then you'll get, you know, you'll get to a point where you look back and think, wow, I did that. I did that. But don't, you know, don't beat yourself up if you've got a massive plan. It always starts with the small steps, even if that's just speaking to someone and telling them what's happened.
Mm, super. What an incredibly and powerful, courageous conversation. Kim, thank you again for sharing your insights, your journey, and also the journey of others, and shining such a vital light on the often hidden realities of financial abuse and dependence. And part of your story and also the story of others is a profound testament to the immense strength of the human spirit, right? Like I mentioned, you being a coach and the other person being going into psychology, right? And the transformative power of really regaining financial independence. So, for our listeners, please remember financial independence isn't just about money, it's about safety, dignity, and the freedom to really choose your own path. So, if you or someone is experiencing financial abuse, please know that you're not alone and help is available. We're going to include some national and also some international resources in our show notes with the kind help of Kim. And it's really been a powerful story. Thank you, Kim, once again. And in future episodes, we're going to continue to kind of delve deeper into specific aspects of of this journey, bringing you more stories, more strategies, and expert advice for really building a life of financial freedom. And for more resources and guidance on financial literacy and building your own secure financial future, please visit paceupinvest.com website. I'm also going to put Kim's link in the show notes as well for those that want to talk to her and have a coaching session with her. And really, we are committed to empowering everyday people on their financial journey, providing the independent financial coaching and wealth management support that you need to thrive. So join us next time on Money Conversation with Everyday People for another vital conversation. And please remember that your financial freedom is within your reach.